Now, once we've chosen some video to use, we actually want to start setting it into our edit. And as you might have guessed, we're going to be doing our edit down in the timeline window down here at the bottom. Whenever you start up a Premiere project, it automatically gives you a Sequence 1 timeline. And what that indicates to us is that we could actually have several timelines if we want to. But for a simple edit, we should be fine with just one. Using this timeline is just as easy as working with Flash in the library, because basically what I want to do is drag elements right on into it. Let me pick out our first clip in the source window. I'm just going to pull down the menu that we just saw, and I'm going to select Ski Ridge Movie, and that's going to be starting out our edit. Now, as I said, we want to drag this into our timeline sequence window, but notice we've got several different layers down here available to us. There are 3 video layers and 3 audio layers. In a Premiere Pro project, you can actually have as many of these layers as you need, but rarely will you need more than 3 of each, especially for a simple edit like this. I'm going to go ahead and grab that video source, and I'm going to grab it right out of the source window and drag it down here. And as you notice, I can drag it into any one of these video layers that we want. Now, it's not going to drag into an audio layer because we're not working with audio at this point. We're only working with video. So Premiere's smart enough to know what kind of clip we have. Since this is the first element we're working with, I'm just going to pull it right into the Video 1 layer, and I'm going to drag it over to the left so it snaps to the beginning of my movie. And what we've done is we've started our edit. Now, as you notice, another panel has popped up here, our Program Sequence panel. And of course, our timeline has the same kind of dragging controls that we saw in our source window. If I grab the playhead in our timeline, I can scrub through our finished video. And if you scrub through this one, you'll notice that the video on our timeline only consists of the video that was in between the in and the out points that we set in the source monitor. Now, the next part in our video was going to be the shaving movie, so let's go ahead and set that up as well. I can drag it from the source monitor just like I did last time, but I can also drag it directly from the project window. I'll pull it on in, drop it right next to the other element in the timeline, and as you can see, we've got some nice snapping controls, so if I get it close to the first piece of video, it's going to snap right up to it. Now, it's pretty tiny for right now, and we'll change that in a moment, but we can see the same thing going here. As I scrub down into the new section of video, we can see that our second clip only contains the video inside of that in and out point that we set up for it as well. Now let's do something about these tiny little clips here. What we're basically dealing with is just a zoom level. Our project by default is set to show us a certain amount of footage, but we're only going to be working with a small amount of that. So we want to zoom in on it so we can get a little bit better view of how our clips are being put together. Now, there's 2 main zoom controls I want to point out to you. One is down on the bottom, and this is a very rough zoom control, but it's pretty obvious. You can see the picture of the small mountains on one end and the big mountains on the other. You can click those buttons to move in and out in steps, but you can also grab this little indicator in the middle and just move it out and scroll to a bigger zoom position. Now, I've scrolled out of the beginning of the movie, so I'm just going to use this little scroll bar down here at the bottom of our timeline to move back to the beginning. And now you can see we've got a zoom position where I can't see the entire movie in one panel. Let me just drop that back by clicking the zoom out button once. And now I can see both of my clips inside the context of the window. The other main zoom control I wanted to point out in the timeline is also pretty easy to use once you get the hang of it. And it's this bar up here at the top. We've got several things that we can do with this bar. We can click on it and drag it around. And what I'm actually doing is scrolling through my project just as if I was grabbing the scroll bar down here at the bottom. But what's different about this scroll bar is I can change the endpoints to zoom in and out as well. I can do it from the right point or the left point here. And here I'm zooming in to be able to see a particular portion of the timeline. And again, I can scroll this back and forth. Now, once you play with it, you notice it's a little bit more sensitive than the control at the bottom, but it also gives you a very easy way to move around your project. I can just scroll out to the point where I can see both my clips, and then drag that bar back so that I have the beginning of my project here as well. When I placed these clips on the timeline, I made sure to snap them next to each other. And if we scrub the playhead around, you'll notice that there's no gap between these clips. I go directly from one clip right on the next frame to the other one. And that snapping can be really important for us. But I don't always have to snap my clips together. In fact, I can grab these clips, I'll select it by the name here, and pull over a little bit, and you can see I can leave a gap if I need to inside my timeline. So I can basically place these clips anywhere we want to. When you're selecting a clip to move it, make sure you grab it from either the name part over here on the left or the blank area on the right. Because as you probably would have noticed if you clicked in this area, this is actually a pull-down menu giving you options on this clip. And it's not going to help you grabbing that clip and moving it around. So always select it from that name portion or from the portion on the right-hand side. And you can just grab that clip and move it around. By setting our in and out points, we've fixed the duration of both of these clips. But as I said before, you can change the in and out points pretty easily even after you've dropped them into the timeline window. If you hold your cursor over the end of either one of these clips, you'll see a little red bar with some arrows on it. And by clicking and dragging at this point, what you're basically doing is changing either the in or the out points. Now in this case, I've grabbed the end of the shaving movie, so if I drag to the right, I'm actually moving the out point by a number of frames out and increasing the duration of my clip. I could shorten the clip just as easily by dragging the other way. And I can do that on the inside as well. So all the settings we set up in our source window are pretty easy to edit, and we don't have to go back to the source window in order to do it. Now I'm going to return these clips back to the way we started. I'm going to drag the first one to the left so it snaps up to the beginning of our movie. And then I'm going to drag our shaving clip up so it snaps right to the end of our ski ridge movie like we had it before. Now since we took a quick look at the program monitor up here at the top, you'll notice you do have two ways to control your timeline. You can use the normal play controls over in the program monitor, and they work just like the play controls that we saw in the source monitor. Or, as you saw before, we can just move the playhead around directly in the timeline itself. A couple of controls that are really nice to take note of in this case are actually these two other buttons on the outside of the step backwards and the step forwards button. This will actually move you to the last edit point or the next edit point. So if I click on this button, it'll move me back to the point in between the shaving movie clip and the ski ridge movie clip. If I click it again, it should move me to the next edit point, which is the beginning of our movie. And that's a real easy way to move your timeline around and set the playhead at exact positions for edit points for any of your clips. Now I only want to go over one more shortcut here to preview your movie. And this one's really useful. You can use it anytime you have a specific window selected. In this case, I've got the program monitor selected, and you can see that by the yellow bar around the outside. And if I hit the space bar, that's going to toggle my play function on and off. So if I hit it again, it's just going to stop the playhead. And the main benefit of that is to see your movie running at full speed. Now, if you've used Premiere before, there's one other function that does a similar thing, and that's the Enter key on the PC, or of course the Return key on the Macintosh. If you press that button, it also gives you a playback, but it gives you a playback of rendered sequences. Now, I'll go into this just to describe what they are. You'll notice we have this red bar across the top of our timeline, and that actually is indicating that we have not rendered any of the sequences that we're working with so far. If I hit the Return key, you'll notice that it starts going in and rendering each one of the frames to give me a preview. Now, the reason for this is if we're making full screen video, it actually has to render all of our edits and render the changes so that we can see the finished video product. But as you saw before, we can just hit the spacebar key and it will simply play through all of our video without having to render it. This is one of the neatest features of Premiere. Now I'm just going to hit cancel on this rendering because we actually don't need it for the project we're working on. So basically, to loop back to the end of this one, you can use the Return key and render all of your sequences. You notice it would take a little while to run through, or you can just use the space bar to toggle on your play functions and play it without having to render each one of these elements.